Hi everyone and welcome back. Welcome to the stream which I planned to just talk about a couple of topics. This stream is like you can say one of my stream where I will be just getting your opinion and your interest and in which particular area I should talk about my next stream. All those things I wanted to know. So this is like we can talk about some generic topics like what should I cover on my YouTube channel. This is really I'm going to put for audience. It's not like I'm putting any random content on my YouTube channel. Now my content will be the audience focused much. Currently, if you talk about what we are covering, so I don't have any particular agenda of this talk. It's all about you guys. You can also talk to me or you can just raise your questions. I can talk about those things in the detail. Okay. So currently what we are doing is we are covering couple of playlists. If I particularly talked about what we are covering, I'm doing a Swiggy clone and then Eats clone app and another playlist I will be adding which is a nextjs advanced course. These are and then there is another playlist I just recently talked about is Ninja Developer, like some common best practices when you write any kind of applications, because you might be working as a software developer or going to be the role of senior software developer. Then what all the things which you must always have to behave like a committed and well knowledge developer, because sometimes you do silly mistakes with any kind of stuff. Like even when you are in some architecture discussions, if you know few things about the architecture patterns and all services development and all, then you can give your valuable inputs and you understand the high level pictures which your tech lead or tech arc or senior developers are talking. Okay, so these are like the couple of playlists currently we are covering. Backend for the intermediate, so you can also post your questions, whatever the questions you have. So what I'm going to do here is let me switch my screens. Okay, so these are like the playlist which we are covering right now, right? Let me stretch the view so you can get the full screen view. Okay, so we are talking about Swiggy clone, Uber Eats clone, nextjs advanced course, and the Ninja Developer. Now, if you talk about, some people are asking me, okay, get this Swiggy clone done, get the Uber Eats clone done, give us the output, right? I can give you the output just right away, but what will be the advantage of it? Because some people, I really think they are looking for their final year project as this, and they just want a final output of the product to be visible so they can use it. So don't do that mistake. It's a continuous learning process. Yes, but my target for these full stack apps, I don't want to extend them much more. I will try to finish them by this month by putting more and more content and creating a lengthy videos. That's the only way I can finish up these playlists, by putting more efforts and finishing them. Apart from that, what I will do is I will take your questions, whatever talking. So let me just take it over here. Okay, so there is a please cover more on the backend for intermediate. So my backend stuff, if you talk about the backend technologies which I'm covering, then we will talk about the application development in 2023, because this is my agenda to talk about, right? This is the agenda why you actually joined the stream. Okay, what you should work on the application development side in 2023. That is our core agenda, but you can just throw me your questions if you have any. Yes, for the intermediate developers, there are already content. I won't say that this is for only intermediate. Coming from the freshers, you can start with the, if you talk about the backend, then very specific to JavaScript, we are covering lots of Express, nextjs, and these are the mainly two framework I have covered, right? So you can focus and you can talk or you can learn more about on those topics. Right, so maybe we don't have much questions. I will directly go and jump on the application development in 2023. So I will go with my favorite diagrams which I used to draw, and there we will talk about all those things. Just give me a second. So application development in 2023, this is based on my opinion and my development experience, that what is happening around the world, like where should you put your more focus. Okay, so I would say, like, if you are a fresher or if you are a really intermediate developer and already building some applications in some enterprise world, then where you can focus, right? Because sometimes you get confused, okay, what you should learn. And if we talk about the application development in 2023, where you should focus for the back end, for the front end and all. So if you are really a fresher, then obviously you should just talk about Express. And if you're already intermediate, then you should focus on the nextjs. And then you should focus more on writing the TypeScript on top of either you are building an API or you are building the front end app. Let me reload this. There is an error coming up again and again. Okay, so now we should be good. Because what happens is, if you are a fresher developer or intermediate developer, then you should learn more about APIs. But when it comes to the APIs, what people think is just getting ready for building simple CRUD operations or watching some YouTube video of mine or someone else to just understand, okay, how to write the CRUD operations using Express, and then you are good with the backend development. In 2023, when you say, okay, I'm a backend developer and doing all those things, that's not going to work at all. Why I'm saying is, okay, because API development and backend is not only this. There are numerous topics which we talk about. Okay, microservices is one of it. So because this is all about how you interact with the API systems, because API system is nothing but some kind of a service running on some system, and which your client, as a client, you are interacting with them, right? This is your API system. Now your API system can be a REST. If you talk about earlier, back in those days, we were also talking about RPC. I mean, I remember that I used to work on the web services, where we used to write a WSDL language. WSDL is a file, web service description language, WSDL file, and we used to write a client, RPC client, for accessing the SOAP based web API. So that is obviously the old days. Now if you talk about the backend, then you can just start your bootstrap your process just by looking at how to build the REST APIs. But that's not the end of it. That's like the, you can say, the hello world of building the API backend systems. Because now in the current world, it's not only just about REST. We have gRPC. Okay, we do have GraphQL. Because around you might be hearing these terms which we are using for API systems, GraphQL, and recently we are also talking about tRPC. And apart from that, there are many other ways to communicate with the backend systems: TCP, Kafka, RabbitMQ, and many more. These are like the transport modes in which you can interact to service, either using synchronous mode or asynchronous mode, right? So it's not all about, okay, you build the REST APIs and you are good, because in the backend systems you might be writing a simple WebSocket APIs, right? WebSocket APIs which can feed the data to the front end clients at the real time. It's like you are keeping the connection alive between client and server, and through the WebSocket your server keeps sending the packets to the client, and then on the front end you are acknowledging, okay, you are receiving these kind of messages. Server send events. So these are all different ways in which your API system or API platform can be built. And when it comes to the framework, I mean, people talk about, okay, why I focus more on the nextjs. Because when it comes to building a clean API platform system, most of my YouTube channel now revolves around, okay, lots of things are on the nextjs, but I'm saying this is the blunt truth. If you know nextjs, you can build anything in the JavaScript, TypeScript. I know people will argue me, okay, there is an Express, Koa, Happy, other frameworks, then why should we learn Express? When you learn nextjs, you will understand the beauty. I mean, it's just I'm not doing the branding, I'm not a brand ambassador of a nextjs, but when you learn and when you adopt, you actually get used to it. You are using an opinionated JavaScript framework for building the APIs, where you can build anything through that. You don't need to look for any other platform to build the APIs. Obviously, nextjs is not just like a magic. It's just a typings added on top of Express, and TypeScript flavor has been added so that you can just use these module system, dependency injections, write your controller, services, factory providers, all the things which you just mix the TypeScript and some Angular pattern of creating the modules. You will just get the nextjs. If you are building Angular systems, then nextjs is really easy. And when it comes to the 2023, I will just put it in the highlights. So API development in 2023, I will say the nextjs is must. Okay, I mean, you must have this particular skill of building the APIs in the nextjs. And I'm not saying to learn it from my channel, or you can explore those resources from anywhere. There may be a best channels out there, or on the nextjs they provide many beautiful and nice courses. That is about API platform systems, where you can build any kind of services. Okay, synchronous services and asynchronous services. When we talk about synchronous services, okay, you are just building a simple REST API. This is your client, and because most of the developers are familiar with the React world, let's say this is my React.js, or these days I won't suggest you to just go and just write everything in the React.js. Must learn Svelte. This is my programming experience. Okay, when you use Svelte, you will really find the difference between React.js and Svelte.js. Here I'm not just talking about how Svelte.js work, what is Svelte.js compiler. But when you talk about Angular, React, Backbone, Ember, those frameworks talks about some common concepts, which is all moves around, okay, what is web development, okay, what is the web development, where you talk about the components, how you write HTML templates. These are web development standards which were released when the Angular 2 was coming into the picture, like the shadow DOM, HTML imports, HTML templates, and reusable components, right? But when you just talk about the Svelte.js, it really blows your mind, because you are really using vanilla JavaScript, and it's really lightweight compiler, which is doing a change detection altogether in the different direction. Okay, so most of these client-side code, we are using React. Even if I talk about myself, I'm also using React a lot. I mean, I moved to totally backend, then I was doing a backend development, and then I now started using React.js for these full stack loan application. Obviously, I need to finish them. So I need to write the front end code of React components with the tailwind, and somewhat in the Next.js 13. Okay, so React.js and Svelte.js, I mean, you can write a React for the front end. That is still fine, because React is going to rule the world. That's no doubt. Svelte.js community is not that large. I mean, Svelte.js is a framework which is being most loud. When we talk about the Stack Overflow census, they actually ask developers, you already know about it, but I'm talking. Stack Overflow release these reports, okay, which is the most popular, which is most loud, which has more GitHub stars on the GitHub. So obviously React.js is on top of that. And if you are good at React.js, nobody is going to replace you in near future, because React.js is also evolving a lot. We have 18.x versions, and lots of changes are happening in the React.js. The changes which I talk about is, now we are using React Query, we are using Redux Toolkit, right? I mean, that depends. If you are writing a complex app, then you should use Redux Toolkit. And then we are using these Tailwind. I mean, I heard that people have migrated from, they were using post CSS, and then styles, putting the styles in the JSX. Obviously it has its pros and cons. But when they start using Tailwind, they used to, I mean, they really loved it, because obviously I will say that out of 10 developers, 5 developers or 7 developers will feel that they don't want to write styles. That's my feeling and a common opinion. When they are getting the already inbuilt pre-built classes, then obviously they can use them. Like we have like Tailwind, so that is a utility framework, and now we are using React with TypeScript. I mean, there is a question, people don't like Tailwind because of maintainability. I may have a different opinion on that. I mean, if you are writing vanilla CSS, vanilla styles of your own project, where there are people who are really good at building the APIs, in that case you can just use the Tailwind. I mean you can write you can use this post CSS, SAS and less, all these preprocessor to build the front end framework. But now using Tailwind, the efforts are now reduced, so people love to use these, and that's how they intended towards it. Yes, there is a pros and cons. The cons is, when I see any particular div in HTML, I see lots of classes. Okay, they are using margin top, margin bottom, flags, flags justify. All these classes are oriented on a same div, which I can just create a simple styled components and just put it there. That will give me all the styles which is there, and you can also maintain that, because that's the styles, and that is the framework which your team has built. I mean, Storybook was evolved around it only. In the Storybook, you have, like in my team also, we used to have a Storybook for the React components. Now we have migrated to the sveltekit and sveltjs. So, and there also we are using some kind of a Storybook to maintain all the components. But in the React, we were having this Storybook concept where we were putting all the components, where if anybody is using it, there is already a CSS styles, everything is already baselined for that component, so you don't need to rewrite anything new. In that case, using the CSS, post CSS or these style components are really nice. But when you are writing a simple application where you don't need to worry about writing these styled and post CSS / you just go with the Tailwind, because it gives you all the utilities. And for me, because that may be the opinion from a backend developer, I spend my 70% or 60% of time building the APIs, building the services of a different type, GraphQL or gRPC, TRPC or REST APIs. So when I move to the front end, it becomes like, okay, Tailwind is, I can just quickly jump in and I start using it. So maybe that has a different perceptions, but this is how we are evolving in React.js. Okay, so how do we make a components readable? Still they prefer style components. I didn't understand the question. Components readable, you just make your components inside a Storybook. And when it comes to the enterprise, I will talk about many startups. I mean, startups really don't care much about, okay, having in the initial phase when they are building the product in the MVP, having a Storybook concept and having a repository. But like the stable companies, where they are already using, they just build a Storybook and they stick to one framework. They don't just plug and play, okay, React, and then tomorrow we are using Svelte.js and start using it, because they have invested a lot in building the Storybook and maintaining that framework, so they keep doing it. But when it comes to the Angular, there are lots of pain points of using Angular and then switching the versions. I think nobody is going through that pain. I used Angular, and then from them you don't see any much content on my channel on Angular. There are lots of regions, and I have my biased opinion on Angular. I really not using the Angular, but there are really nice features on Angular, like observables and RxJS signals. All those concepts I'm thinking in future, when I have really nice time, I will cover them. Okay, API development or in 2023 or overall development in 2023. So I will say just build something really nice, either using Express or the nextjs, but at least you should know how to build a really nice APIs by following the REST API standards, because people still do the mistakes while building the APIs. Playing a simple resources where you are just creating the users or simple CRUD, that is fine, but when you are having 10 to 20 tables, you following the proper REST API standards is really become tricky. You just pass lots of parameters in the query params, not maintaining the proper signature of the APIs. That becomes a lot of challenges. Okay, now I mean, front and back end, that is fine. You don't need to learn 10 different framework. You can stick to only React.js. That is still very good in 2023. I would say that learn one framework apart from Express for the backend API development. Just you can go with the nextjs, and nextjs is really TypeScript oriented, and whatever code you are writing, use the TypeScript. And like React with TypeScript, now everybody knows that you can't get rid of TypeScript. Okay, you have to have TypeScript in your platform. Then there are lots of new libraries are there when you want to write forms, React hook forms. I used React Formic, but now I think that the libraries have evolved a lot. You can use React hook forms and all those things. And when it comes to building the SSR, okay, this is all about CSR, right? Client side rendering, which we are doing with all these framework, CSR. But when it comes to the SSR, then how you should go? Recently, I covered one playlist where I was talking about Next.js 13 because it was something new, and I really like that feature which Next.js 13 was providing, because I really didn't like the earlier version of Next.js where you have to write these get server side props, get static path, those methods, because I always forgetting those methods and not writing the code properly. Now with the SSR, and when we talk about Next.js 13, it really has the beautiful features like app directory feature, which was already there in the sveltekit, which is just like server side version of the svelte.js, because I became familiar with that sveltekit first, then I started learning and doing some implementation with the Next.js. So when it comes to the SSR, you are good at React, you must learn Next.js 13. There are lots of things already available, and it's not like, okay, Next.js is for building the server side components. Now there is a concept of server side components, but you can build the client side components also. It's not like, okay, SSR you are using then everything you are going to fetch and execute at the server side. You just specify the component and just use a client only, use client, right? That will execute those components same as what you are doing in the React app. Those components will run on the browser. Okay, so this is about SSR. You can also learn sveltekit if you are inclined towards svelte.js learning. Otherwise, Next.js 13 is you should migrate your projects to Next.js 13 just for a POC. And for the React, you can use create React app with the TypeScript, and I mean, it is already evolving, so that you don't need to do anything. The Facebook teams is doing good in maintaining the React versions. For the APIs, Next.js you can adopt. So this is all about simple API development, but this is not the end of now development story, because now the things is lots of automation is happening. This AI world came into the picture, so you can't stick to yourself just using this front end and back end, because I guarantee you in near future, because we have these CLI tools which are really powerful, Angular CLI, create React app, and there are many npm modules which even gives you these full stack application just by writing a single command npm. So there may be a simple create full stack app space your full stack app name, framework names, and just give you simple boiler project which has some APIs for e-commerce, for the shopping cart, all these platforms, right? So there are many platforms. So I mean, just by doing this front and back end, the two-tier architecture is not enough. You should learn more about the architectures and the microservices, how you can split your logic into different services and can split it. You can also learn about micro frontends, because that is also being adopted using this Webpack module federation. I mean, Webpack module federation enables us to have a micro frontend where you can have a different frameworks getting rendered on a same home page. Okay, let me take some questions. Can you explain us the encryption in the backend, AES encryption on the front end? I somewhat got the question. AES encryption on the backend, somewhat got, but front end I didn't get it, because front end what we do is there is a bundle. we are just rendering the build.dist folder which contains the index.html. The only thing for the security on the front end side is you should not be exposing any access key or secret key of any server side stuff. Okay, like if you're using Auth0 or if you're using Firebase, then you can just expose the client ID, right? But not the client secret or anything else inside your build. And then for security of front-end application, there are many things which you should learn. Okay, when you are rendering the front end from the cloud front or from any Netlify, you can have a content security policy. You can return custom headers. You can enable the cross-origin resource sharing. So those like what happens is this cross-origin resource sharing problem is associated to the API security, because there is some API. If I talk about API securities and all, let's do that. So here, let's say this is your API. We can talk about simple example to understand it. And this is your front end. When you are trying to do simple application development on your local setup, what you do is, this is your API and I'm just doing my front end development. This is my UI. We don't care much about how the UI is interacting with the APIs. We just running this application on localhost port 4000, let's say, and this is running on let's say 4002, and you should be able to communicate. But in the real world, how you maintain the security of your API systems, which is being consumed by your application, and your application is hosted on, let's say, app.example.com, and this is exposed on api.example.com. I mean, both are using same domain, right? But your APIs are exposed, right? I can just do inspect on the front end and can see, okay, what are those your APIs? And let's say you are running on some DigitalOcean or some platform. I can just I can just use some systems to hit those APIs millions number of times. So there are many things which you should understand, how you can secure, how you can just add the rate limiting and all these middleware on top of your APIs, so nobody should be able to misuse your APIs. First of all, protect them. How can you protect? You can allow only this front end, this UI, which is hosted on app.example.com, only to be able to talk to api.example.com. And how that can be done, you can just enable a cross-origin resource sharing policy on your APIs that will say, okay, these APIs can only be accessed through the app.example.com, not like localhost or any other try to access, then they will throw error if you are using browser, because sometimes these APIs somebody can use Postman and can try to hit. In that case, they will be able to access it, because cross-origin resource sharing is something which browser enforce, not the Postman or any additional clients, right? So if you are sending the cross-origin resource sharing headers from this API, that only stop your browser to stop calling these APIs. But what happens if I'm using Postman or Insomnia or any load test tool? Obviously, your APIs should be protected first of all. Not any, I mean, there are private APIs and there are public APIs. Private APIs should be using this Helmet, and I mean, there are many Node.js modules, content security policy, CSURF. There are many modules. Helmet is like one of the module. CSURF, I don't remember the exact name. And then you should enable the cross-origin resource sharing at your API level, so nobody can randomly access. And obviously, you should protect your APIs. And how can you protect? With some session, and session can exist in different ways. There can be a cookie based session, token based session from the front end while accessing your APIs. I mean, this is like very generic topic which I won't be covering in detail. So once the session exists either in the cookies or either through the JWT stateless token, then only if you are passing that in the whole headers or inside cookies, and if your token is valid and has not expired, then only you should be able to access your APIs. You should also be validating the identity of the token, like the user exists, user ID in the token is still active in the system, all those things. will always be there to validate how we are doing it. Okay, so this is how you can secure APIs. And then backend APIs, yeah, obviously this is how you can secure backend APIs. There are many modules in the nextjs 12-factor principles. I have covered lots of aspects to secure your APIs. There are existing modules which you can add so that you can hide the additional headers, like there are some express, because it's also express app, and when you check the response headers, you should hide the implementation details. Okay, this is built on top of nextjs. So all those modules, helmet modules, you can use so that nobody should be able to do the MIME sniffing, cross origin resource sharing attacks, XSS attacks, MIME sniffing. Like they will just randomly send the different MIME types, so that is MIME sniffing. You can prevent that. Now I'm coming to the next topic, is what else? Just not two-tier architecture. I will suggest is you should build one, just a simple full stack application, and try to see how you can split the logic of a simple application into multiple services or multiple front-end application. Because just building a one UI and looking at some tutorials and building the APIs, just CRUD operation is not enough. What you can do is you said just simple is you try to divide the logic into multiple services, and those are independent services, right? Your front end is aware that this is a service 1, service 2, service 3. They all exposes the protected APIs. Okay, nobody can directly access them. And from front end, either you can just create your custom Node.js gateway. So you will be just talking to one centralized endpoint, and then this is going to reroute your traffic to these platforms, because you are just doing some POCs and doing some learnings, because you are not deploying it to the AWS where you already have application load balancers and all, which are routing your traffic to the multiple instances. Or you don't have API gateway like AWS API gateway or Azure API gateway, which are capable enough for implementing the routing and all. So this is all about what example application you should build. You can take a simple example of, okay, you want to build a Flipkart clone or Amazon clone. Don't focus much on, okay, I need to have a smart UI and all. Just try to identify, okay, I want to have auth service. This auth service I can build either using some external service like auth0, which is a provider, or you can just use simple Firebase. Okay, because Firebase implementation is easy. Here you just do the Firebase implementation with some provider, or currently there is a next auth is also becoming popular. Simply you will just use Firebase. You get the tokens and the token, and now your APIs are responsible for validating the token. Okay, you are sending the right token, otherwise you are not allowing them to access. Just based on the domain, this is the auth domain, this is the order domain, this is the product domain. Based on the domain, I can isolate these microservices which are totally decoupled. Okay, I'm not going to talk to auth service, I'm not going to talk to the order service. This product is only responsible for listing down the list of products on the UI, and those APIs are public, because a simple public user can try to just access and search the products. There can be a search API. So just try to build some POC around it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm available on Slack channel. You can ping me anytime. I can suggest you or can give you some simple bootstrap projects where you can extend. How can you monitor microservices when one of the microservices fail? How to track it? And there are many tools. Like currently, you can use this New Relic and Key Metrics. Key Metrics. I can talk about New Relic, Key Metrics. Okay, Key Metrics monitor. Not Sentry. Sentry is for front end. I'm not able to recall the name of that. Key Metrics that is used for PM2 based services. Yes, PM2 key metrics, but that is when you are running a key metrics, when you are running using PM2 for your production based applications. But New Relic is more than enough to monitor the services. But in this particular case, like there are multiple type of architectures, and how you deal with these kind of situation, that depends on how you are building your services. Let's say this is the auth service, and you are getting all the requests of your platform inside auth service to authenticate, and if it is down, so this is a single point of failure, you cannot recover from it. Even if there are, like, if you do the faulty deployment, there are two services and both are down, then you can't just really do anything, you need to fix it. Otherwise you can do a blue green deployment, because obviously you are not pushing the solution to the production directly. You have multiple stages which is validating that your code really works, so it is not going to just break the production right away. You can have multiple instances, and then you can do blue green deployment, where one instance will be updated, and then after the healthy recovery the second instance will be rolled out. There are multiple strategies to do the deployments, but for monitoring, New Relic is good enough. It can send you alarms and all. When you talk about the AWS platform, there also we can actually monitor the CloudWatch logs, and if there is an error, send a message to the Slack channel, Teams, and raise an alarm. This is how you really monitor services. But do not make the services single point of failure, at least the auth service. If your any external service is broken, then obviously your platform will still be running, just only some part of the things are not working. Like in Swiggy, once time what happens is the restaurant APIs or restaurant platforms were not working, so I was just getting the cache data, whatever the restaurant I got on the first attempt. When I refresh it, the list got empty, and there was like some outage, small outage. Okay, so for backend we have to know about Kubernetes too. Man, Kubernetes is way too far. I will just talk about one simple thing is when you talk about the deployment. Okay, because let's say you are building a simple full stack solution, then Kubernetes is not must have, good to have knowledge. Even I'm reading about Kubernetes since 2 to 3 years. I'm not deploying each and every application to the Kubernetes. Obviously it comes with a cost. You can't maintain the Kubernetes cluster and the Kubernetes infra locally. You need to use either AWS or Azure solutions for the Kubernetes. So let's say you are building a simple service and you wanted to deploy your services. So your services are built with simple nextjs applications. Okay, let me move this down here. You have written multiple nextjs services. Okay, what is the best solutions currently we have in our plate is you can write lambdas, and this is 2023. These lambdas, the whole microservice, small microservice, the REST API can be deployed as a single lambda to AWS. Because I remember the pain of deploying these services on a EC2 instance. If we are using these Heroku based solutions where they are maintaining the infra, AWS is also maintaining the infra of EC2, but I know the challenges. Here you can just use the Heroku, you just do the push and code will be updated and your application is refreshed. That is really easy. But when it comes to the deployment, you can also deploy your application as a lambda. So learn more about lambda. I mean, this is must have knowledge. You should know how to create a lambda and how to deploy a whole service as a lambda. Either you do it manually by zipping the code, uploading it to the lambda, setting the environment memory configurations, putting the environment variable manually, attach the lambda to the API gateway and share the URL to the clients. Okay, so do the lambda. Kubernetes must have, it's not must have if you really know the Kubernetes and doing the real implementation, because you will understand more about Kubernetes until only if your team is using it. Then you understand the, okay, what is a Kubernetes flow pod, what is the kubectl, etcd, how the kube commands are really working, what are the different kube commands to interact with the Kubernetes pod, how the code is getting updated, how the services are getting deployed, what is the ingress rule, and all these things, what are the deployments, how to write a Kubernetes pod YML files to deploy a simple application to the Kubernetes. But you must have good knowledge on Docker. That's really important and required, because that was really important and required 5 years ago, and today also for the developers. You should understand how to write Docker file, Docker compose, Docker containers. And if somebody asks you to just orchestrate a simple microservices locally, you should be able to understand, you should be able to orchestrate the multiple microservices with the front end using Docker. Okay, now there is another questions. Do you recommend reading books for programming, like reading a book for the Django, because the book covers advanced stuff, the video tutorial don't? I mean, that depends. If I mean, that I agree, because sometimes back in those days I also bought some Udemy courses for learning AWS architect course. Obviously I failed. I mean, I paid a huge amount, but that didn't cover those many aspects which we see in the real life, because somebody has written this book, so whatever the knowledge that guy has, put those in the book. But obviously that guy, even in the expert level who got the certification, doesn't have each and everything. So getting used to, I mean, today's world, reading a book and spending that much of time, if you are reading a novel or fictional book, then this is easy. I used to do the book reading back in college days when I got the degree. I was just learning, okay, JavaScript for concept book, which I till now I have, and then Java 8th edition book which contains all the Java programming concepts. But after that, I think I didn't go through any book. It's really hard to pick a book and do the reading right now. But yeah, people love to read the book. That's a good part. You must do it. What must the topics for when applying for backend engineer? I mean, I can also give you the tips of backend interviews. I mean, lots of people do the fake mock interviews on YouTube, and I see, okay, there is a TCP is asking, it's like TCS backend interviews, and they are asking funny questions. But when it comes to the real backend interviews, which you are giving for some enterprise or startups, if you're talking about FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, then obviously they don't ask much about the front and backend. They just go with the data structure, algorithm, and core concepts and problem solving. But obviously not each and every company ask those set of questions. I know a lot of startups and good startups which are paying well. They focus more on what you are doing in day to day. They are building like some kind of startups, not in the size of Netflix, but doing the same kind of a streaming platform. They have multiple services and they are writing Node.js. So what they are focused more on, they are focused more on how to build the APIs which can scale well, which can be deployed very resilient, which can handle the concurrency, which can handle all the 12 factor principles. It should have a configurations, it can be deployed seamlessly, it should be able to scale, it should not consume a huge amount of memory. You should not be just putting any random JavaScript npm dependency in the service, which may exploit your service and create a security risk. You should be able to write optimized SQL queries. Either you use a type ORM, you should be able to optimize a optimized SQL join using ORM, or just write a plain SQL query. At the end, the business should run and your APIs should be fast enough. I can explain you one simple example of back in my days. We were using these ORMs, and I mean, we were writing the same SQL query which ORM executes, like Node.js ORM, but our performance was slow. ORM doesn't slow down your performance, but the queries, the type ORM executes many queries, and if you are doing too much joins in the type ORM, which you can just write a simple SQL query, then obviously it's more readable and you know what you're doing. And there were lots of type ORM statement we were doing, so we just reduced that to 1 or 2 SQL queries which are really readable, and we were using query builder. So our performance went way far ahead from writing the ORM. So those type of security, those type of solutions you should be able to do. And obviously the security, you should know how you are implementing the role-based authorization, how you are implementing the token-based authentication system, so you are not leaking your APIs. You should know how you can build a middleware to do the limit threshold and rate limiting and all these things. That's the right job for you. This is how you can crack any interviews. Those are not advanced topics, but obviously you should be able to build any microservices. Microservices can be just REST-based API, Graphql APIs, or any event-driven messaging system you are building in the Node.js. Okay, which college are you from? I don't think this is really matters. Yes, I'm not from IIT or NIT. I tried my best in 2000, I will say 11. I didn't get an opportunity from the general category. So I'm from private college, and it's like 12 years I'm in IT industry and doing these tutorials sometimes when I have enough time for showcasing what I'm doing. That's it. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can ask, but this is about development. And when it comes to the cloud, as a developer, I created one playlist which talks about, okay, how you can work with AWS CDK. So why I'm talking about AWS CDK? Because when it comes to doing something without using AWS console, it's really scary for developers. I mean, in most of the teams where you talk about the big enterprise, you obviously don't get a chance to work on AWS. What you do is there is already a platform, CI/CD, infrastructure is already there. There is operation teams. So that is the disadvantage of working in big enterprise where you have teams for each and everything. There is a QA or 10 different QAs, and there is operation teams, there is a DevOps team. But when you are working on a small startup or a small project, then you get an opportunity to work on something which you can learn and do, because people get scared when it comes to CI/CD deployments of anything. Even you talk about simple APIs which you build just a CRUD operation, right? They get scared, and but when they want to learn, right? Everybody wants to learn. What they do is, even I did, is I went through the AWS and did this practitioner certification and applied for it and did it, right? But that's not the end, because practitioner certificate is only understanding the AWS components. I'm not saying go through the AWS. You can use a Google Cloud, you can use Azure, because the concepts are same. They also provide a virtual machine. AWS also have a same component, EC2. Azure also has API gateway. AWS also have API gateway. So the components are kind of similar. It's just like they have their different consoles and different way of integrating things. So when it comes to the cloud, you can just become more familiar with the AWS, I will say, from the UI console by creating the accounts and putting your some credit card, which, because they gives us 1 year subscription free. If you want to play around, they won't charge anything, but you should also not be creating some extra large machines so that AWS start charging you. But you can, why I'm talking about CDK, because now these days we are writing TypeScript and JavaScript, TypeScript for front end, back end. Same you can use to build infra. Even while talking about AWS CDK, I focused more on learning AWS CDK. Even for my latest blog series, I'm covering all the AWS CDK part, which talks about how to get familiar with the AWS CDK. There are like 12-14 parts. This is like deploying the AWS services from the scratch. And if you have really a good AWS knowledge, that is really a best advantage, I will say, in the today's world. Everybody is like, I remember that Java developers also learning Angular, so they are calling themselves as a full stack. And whoever knows the React very good, also learning the APIs. So we have like a huge chunk of the full stack developers. But for me, the definition of full stack developer is not just sticking to just some React or building an APIs. You should be able to do anything in JavaScript. I'm not saying you should learn Ruby, Go and all. That's just an add-on on top of what you already have. Having the knowledge of AWS always give you advantage on top of other developers, and you can showcase by just doing something on this. AWS CDK just like a toolkit, like AWS SDK. CDK gives you an opportunity to build your AWS infrastructure, like deploying S3 bucket, creating SNS topic, creating a virtual machine, deploying your nextjs microservice as a Lambda, deploying your simple React app on S3 bucket and exposing that through the CloudFront. CloudFront is a CDN which can talk to your S3 bucket. You push your code to S3 bucket and you see your application live. Next thing you need is just like GoDaddy domain or buy a domain from AWS Route 53. Okay, this is another advantage or add-on you can have. Even if you have a manual knowledge like using UI console, you already know how this component works, how you can build a nice infrastructure. This is all about 3 to 4 years of experience. Because nowadays I would say that competition is hard. From the days from I belong, like 10 years back in 2011, those days people do not many developers out there, and then now we have, even you might see 1 year experience college developer is building a smart application. They are just integrating with the chat GPT APIs and showcasing their stuff on the GitHub. If I see a readme file, I mean, there is a GitHub readme which gives a description. There is just like a 1 year experience from a private college doing awesome stuff. That's really nice, right? Because now you have a more learning content, but at least you need some guidance to orient yourself in particular target. What type of data structures should we know for a backend developers? I don't think you need to just, because in backend development, what you really deal with in day-to-day programming, just array. We are not going to build a trees or just graph or a stack. You just mostly in JavaScript, I will say we deal with the objects and array in the plain objects, array, functions, classes. So there is no point of dealing with the data structure unless there is a problem which ask you to build a tree and build the relationship of the nodes and doing the insertion, updation, deletion of those nodes in a simple nested tree structures, right? Then you need to worry about using the data structures in JavaScript. But that is my experience. Whatever the computer science knowledge I had back in those time in 4 years is really not worth. Yes, there are lots of good subjects, computer networking and all, but really you need to fight and struggle and really learn after coming out of college to get a good hands-on, because college degree doesn't teach you. Even art student after just learning coding can do much more. Even I see, you might have heard about that civil engineer has joined some IT job, right? Or some mechanical engineer is doing good, because it's a computer engineering. If you are doing a college degree, that doesn't teach you much about the job. You can learn it from outside courses and learning resources, and you can just do something good out there. Okay, so I can take few more questions if we have, otherwise it's time to end our stream. And next, as I promised, what I will be focusing more on is some lengthy full stack courses, because currently the challenge which I'm facing is these playlists are getting very long, and I wanted to now increase the length of the videos to at least 1 hour, so that we can do more in less number of videos. Because when I talk about 20 more videos, the interest of the people get reduced and they start feeling boring. That's what I think. When I see the comments, they are still waiting. So I will try to put more lengthy videos which contains more content about building the services, building the front-end components and all. And that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, that's all we have in this session. I hope you really like these interactions, and we can meet very often based on your recommendation. It's not like I need to post something, and if you are recommending, okay, we need to talk, we need to discuss couple of points, there is a Slack channel open. If you want to raise some questions, even you can just ping, send a personal chat instead of putting something on general. If there is that is something which you don't want to expose to the public world, like to everyone who reads your message, you can send me the private text. Okay, I think there are more content in front end. Can you do the videos on microservices? Yes, I did. If you remember, my recent playlist are talking about nextjs microservices. I mean, forget about nextjs. These all are microservices, and there is a huge playlist of 100 videos which talks about microservices. And front-end content, I didn't cover much front-end recently. Like, let's say last 6 months, I'm doing more on the back-end side. Okay, so that's all, guys. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, or if you are not able to find any playlist on my channel, you can go to the Slack. I think if you go to my channel, there is a Slack link on the header. You click on it, join my channel, and you can send a text. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being a good audience, and thanks for bearing me just speaking a lot. Okay, I have been developing side projects since I started the BC. I started from jQuery, PHP, and now developing apps in Next.js. That's really good. Keep learning, keep doing. Okay, I will do more on the backend. Maybe you can give me suggestions. What should I do? Because my plate is already full. I covered everything on the nextjs. I will be doing one playlist on the nextjs advanced stuff. That will cover lots of things like building the REST API and using the nextjs core concept, nextjs interceptor, nextjs services, how nextjs dependency injection work, how we create a dynamic modules in the nextjs, how we create a custom modules which we already have like nextjs typeorm, nextjs swagger, and how we write interceptors, how we use pipes, how we create a WebSocket APIs in the nextjs, how we do the integration of nextjs with Elasticsearch, with AWS S3, with any external service like AWS, like SendGrid, Twilio. All these are third-party services. So how can we integrate with those using nextjs? Due to less professional experience, I have problem finding good jobs and opportunities. So if I link your previous message, I mean, it depends on sometimes on the luck and your profile. I will say groom your profile, do more side projects, and try to market yourself well, that you know these things, you can do these things, you can learn well, and you can implement anything. Okay, not just like limit yourself to the nextjs. And don't expose things now that you know jQuery. We are not in 2010 or 20, we are in 2023 where nobody cares about if you know jQuery, and even the PHP, because if you talk about PHP in JavaScript world, then they don't care much. If I'm hiring a JavaScript developer, then if somebody knows PHP, then I would prefer him little less. I know these are all programming are same. PHP is a server-side scripting language which does everything on the server side, but it depends on how you build your profile. Just dedicate yourself profile to the JavaScript domain. Yes, you can show your experience that I do all these things, side projects, and you can showcase some of your live projects by deploying your app on the Netlify, which is free. What is the best ORM to use, Prisma or SQLize or Postgres? Okay, TypeORM, SQLize, TypeORM, and Prisma. I would say you can still stick to TypeORM. It has lots of GitHub issues, but still stable because it supports TypeScript. SQLize, when it comes to just writing a JavaScript, SQLize is good. I did a playlist back in 3 or 4 days year ago on SQLize that is still valid. TypeORM is popular Node.js TypeScript oriented framework which can do anything. Prisma is something new, and I even also explored Prisma and put a playlist on my channel. But the only thing is Prisma does the migration really well. That's, I will say honestly, you don't need to deal with the migrations. What you do is just you write a schema dot, I think there's a dot schema file, Prisma dot schema file. It creates a Prisma client, and then using the Prisma client, you can just do a simple get, put, post, delete method. Because when you do npm install, when you actually do the generate, it generate a Prisma client, including your models which are defined in the Prisma schema file. So that is doing out of the box, which none of the ORM is currently doing. So Prisma is doing something best. So if you are bored of using TypeORM, SQLize, go to the Prisma. Otherwise, there are Objection.js, Next, KNEX, that is also really lightweight. Okay, is ORM more faster than raw SQL queries? That is a really wrong perception. Don't think about it, because the ORM is also doing the same. It's just like object representation, which is a wrapper on top of it, but it is also doing the SQL queries, raw SQL queries. Or you write a SQL query with alias, because ORMs actually do a lot of aliasing. If you write a query with alias or write a query without alias, there is not major difference in the performance. Both are doing the same thing. So some people earlier back in those days were saying ORMs are slow. ORM is just an object class representation of your entities. That is just helping you to write a code in more cleaner way, instead of just putting the SQL queries everywhere and then maintaining them by updating the SQL query manually. Okay. Is it difficult to roll back in general? How do we roll back from the migration? Okay, that's a good question. When you want to roll back, what we do is in TypeORM migration, we write up and down, right? So when you do npm run migration run, what it does is it does the migration. When you do npm run migration rollback, I mean, this is just an npm script you can add that will just use this TypeORM CLI, which actually rollback. And you need to specify which particular migration you want to roll back, it will just execute the down statement from the rollback file, that migration file, and down you might be deleting the column and reverting the changes which you have done in the up method of your type or migration. Same thing applies to the Prisma. But when it comes to the code, that's really tricky, because let's say you execute a migration, but what happens is in my case, I run the migration first and then I do the deployment. If migration failed, we do the rollback and we don't do the deployment. So there is no code update is getting sent, being deployed if the migration is failed, right? Okay, so any other questions? I will say, I mean, I should stop here. Otherwise, there will always be a questions. If you have a really, I mean, I really love to answer your questions. There are really good questions from the audience. You can send me your questions on the Slack, or my email is already there. If you have any query, I can just add it here. If you are unable to find it on the YouTube channel. Okay, and on top of that, this channel is not, I didn't create it just to earn money and all. I do a lot of charity with this money. I have enough money from my salary, so I don't need to buy it. And I don't even do lots of videos because I'm already doing a full-time job. But this platform I can use for sharing my knowledge with the developers. Back in my college days also, I used to have a group where I used to train my juniors. So I'm just carrying forward that legacy. What makes Nest.js a good choice for microservices? Okay, questions won't stop, I think. Okay, yeah, Nest.js is good for microservices, because if you go with the Express or anything and you want to build a simple microservices, what is microservice? REST APIs, I can do with Express. But when it comes to dealing with the Kafka, RabbitMQs and all, there is no proper, because this framework is unopinionated. Nobody baseline, okay, how you do the microservices in Express. So Nest.js, these lightweight microservices are just enabling you to create a client which is sending a message to the RabbitMQ, Kafka or Redis, and there is a subscriber which is reading the message, and you can create a TCP and all these TCP, Kafka, gRPC based microservices. The only important thing is this gives us a proper structure. So if I'm writing a microservice and if you are writing a microservice, our code will match, or only the implementation business logic will be different. Okay, thanks everyone. You are a really good audience, and I should stop the stream now. Maybe we'll connect one more time and we can talk more about these advanced topics. Thank you everyone. Have enjoy your rest of the day. It's Sunday.